I'm making this video right now because I know that people get really scared when they see this word, quadratic. Guys, it's a paper tiger, okay? That means it's just not that scary. I want to show you kind of visually how these things are put together so you're not so afraid of them. Let's take a quadratic equation. Y equals x squared plus 6x plus 4. Okay? Now, the reason it's called quadratic, okay, this word here, the reason it's called quadratic is because it has this squared right here. Okay? And that 2, you would call that an exponent. But in math language, what they do is they call this, they call this a degree 2. This is degree 2. You know, similarly, we don't ever write it, but kind of hiding over here. Hiding over here, there is a 1, right? Again, we don't ever highlight that, but right here, okay, that right there can be called degree 1. So when you have a degree 2 equation, you're talking about a quadratic. All quadratics have a squared term. Example, x squared. Okay? So that's why this is called a quadratic. Now, there's another part of this thing that is really useful that you should know, and that's this number right here with its sign. Okay? That is the y-intercept of the graph. We'll use this funny color here. This right here, this is the y-intercept. Okay? And there's actually one more thing to understand about the graph, and that is the number that sits in front of the x. So in this case, it's not written, but there is a 1 right there, and it's a positive 1. Okay, this is a positive 1 right here. And let me tell you what that means. Okay, what that means, because this is a positive 1, it means the graph points up like this. Okay? If that had been a negative number, then it would point down like this. Okay? So, this is positive, this is negative. This is a positive number, so the graph is going to point up. It's going to cross the y-axis at 4, okay? And we call it a quadratic because it has a squared term, which means it's a degree 2 equation. Okay, so quadratic is just another way. Let me write it like this. Just another way of saying degree 2. Okay, so this is not anything you should be afraid of. It doesn't do anything weird. Basically, quadratics are just curved lines. Okay, so this quadratic is a curved line. Now, when people say they solve quadratics, okay, solve, so scary. What does it mean to solve a quadratic? What does that mean? Well, it's not really like a normal math problem. Okay, here's what it doesn't mean. 4x plus 2 equals 10. We solve this equation, subtract 2 from both sides. Okay, and then you'd have 4x equals 8. Divide both sides by 4. X equals 2. Okay, that's not what we mean here. It's different. So, what do we mean? Let's go back and grab this thing. X squared plus 6x plus 4. Let me write it. X squared plus 6x plus 4. What do we mean by that? Y equals. What do we mean solve it? Okay? Well, what we're trying to find is something very specific. And I am trying to find my red pen. Okay? No, I want to go with blue. We want to know where the graph crosses the x-axis. Okay? And this is what it means to solve a quadratic. We want to find where the graph crosses the x-axis. That's what it means to solve a quadratic. All right, so if we wanted to solve this quadratic, here's how you do it. Y equals x squared plus 6x plus 4. Y equals x squared plus 6x plus 4. First step, turn this y into a 0. Okay? Second step, move the 0 and the equal sign over here. Okay? Put that equal sign right here. Okay? That's what we want to do. We want to make sure that this equation looks like this. The standard form of a quadratic is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So in this example, we already know what a is. A is 1. Okay? Well, we already know what b is. B is 6. And we know what c is. C is 4. So that's why you want to write it in standard form. Okay? The formula I wrote down here, this right here, this formula is called standard form. So, how do you solve the quadratic? We still haven't quite drilled down there, have we? Well, we're taking our time. We're going to get there, I promise. So let's write it again. Now we know what we're writing. x squared plus 6x plus 4 equals 0. So we want to solve it. How do you solve a quadratic equation? Well, there's many different ways that you can solve it. I'll list them in terms of their difficulty. Come over here, like ways of solving. One, graph it. Okay, if you can graph it and actually see where it crosses the x-axis, you're done. Right? 2, factor it. That's mid-level, okay? And there's simple factoring. Okay, that's 1. And then 2, there's factoring by grouping. Okay, grouping. No, go away. 3, use the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is really easy to remember once you practice it. I'm not going to write it right now because it would terrify you. But we'll teach you a way to memorize it. Number 4, complete the square. So this is what I like to think of as the attack plan. Have you ever heard of DEFCON? Defense condition? Okay, so these are like the different levels of DEFCON. If the situation is pretty easy, then we'll just graph it, and then we'll be done. If we can't graph it, or we don't have like graphing software available, we'll factor it. And factoring is what we're going to be doing the most of by hand. Okay, we'll try to do simple factoring if we can. And if we can't, we'll factor by grouping. Number 3, use the quadratic formula. All right. If you can't use the quadratic formula or you're being asked to, you'll complete the square. So first, let's graph this thing. All right. Let's graph this thing. X squared plus 6x plus 4. Let's go to Desmos. And let's plug it in. Because this is definitely the easiest way, right? X squared plus 6x plus 4. There it is. Right there. Those are the 2 places where it crosses the x-axis. So we're done, right? Yeah, I mean, you're done. That's where it crosses the x-axis. See? And the y-intercept is at 4. Not too bad. And that's all we're doing when we solve the equation. Okay? The solutions to this were, let's go back and look at them again. Okay, the solutions were x equals negative 5.236 and x equals negative 0.764. And that's it. So I'm going to leave you with some quadratic equations, and I want you to just graph them in Desmos and make sure that you can figure out where they cross the x-axis. All right? And we'll go from there, because we're going to take it one step at a time, guys. If you move too fast, it'll scare the devil out of you. So we learned how to do this today. Easy. All right. So let me give you guys some equations to go plug into Desmos. Here's some examples. Okay, or here's some homework. All right. 1. Y equals 2x squared plus 3x minus 7. There's 1. 2. I want to use a different color. 2. Y equals x squared minus 6x minus 18. And 3. Y equals negative 4x squared plus 24. Okay? So what I want you to do with all of these 3 is I want you to plug into Desmos. Okay, step 1. Step 2, see where they cross the x-axis. Okay, this is the solution. Okay, answer. These are the answers.